The little blue jar sits on my nightstand right now. The same brand, the same shape, the same smell that filled my grandmother's bedroom in 1954. I can close my eyes and put myself back there. The oil lamp turned low. The quilt she stitched from feed sacks pulled up to my chin. Her thick fingers, knotted from 60 years of wash water and wringer washers, rubbing that menthol salve into my chest while I coughed my way through the croup. The room smelled like camphor and cedar and wood smoke, and I got well. Every single time I got well. My name is Ruth. I am 81 years old this November. I have raised 4 children, buried 2 husbands, kept a kitchen garden for 57 years running, and I have used one little blue jar of Vicks VapoRub in just about every way a woman can use a thing. I bought my first jar in 1962 for 39 cents at the Rexall drugstore on Main Street. 39 cents. Today, that same jar runs you near $9, and people act like it is only good for one purpose. It is not. It never was. Now, I want you to stay with me because there is one use for this jar I did not understand until I was past 70 years old. My own mother knew it. My grandmother knew it. Somewhere between their kitchen and mine, the knowledge slipped through a crack in the floor, and I almost lost it for good. I will tell you what it is before we are done. It will change the way you look at that little blue jar on your shelf forever, but you have to walk the road with me to get there. Here is the part that still makes me angry. Quiet, angry, the kind that settles in your bones. This salve was never just a chest rub. It was a whole medicine cabinet in one tin. The men who made their money selling us 12 different products in 12 different bottles needed us to forget that. So they narrowed it down in the advertising, narrowed it down on the label, narrowed it down in our minds until a jar that used to do 20 jobs only did one. Nobody banned it. They did something worse. They made us forget. And nobody sat your mother down and told her the way her mother told her. I am telling you now because I do not have forever to do it. The first thing I learned from watching my mother in the summer of 1958. We had a screened porch and no air conditioning, and the mosquitoes that summer were biblical. She took a dab of Vicks on her finger, no bigger than a pea, and rubbed it on her wrist and the back of her neck before she went out to snap beans at dusk. The bugs left her alone. They feasted on me. The eucalyptus oil and the cedar leaf in that salve, they confuse the bugs. They cannot find the warm skin underneath. I have used it every summer since. A pea-sized dab on the pulse points, ankles, wrists, behind the ears. Cost you maybe 3 cents per application. Compare that to the spray cans full of chemicals I cannot pronounce. But knowing one thing led me to wonder about another. If it kept the mosquitoes off, what about the rest of God's nuisances? My Aunt Pearl, who kept a boarding house in Asheville, swore by a thin smear of Vicks along the baseboards in the pantry. Said the mice would not cross it. I thought she had gone soft in the head. Then I had mice in my own pantry in the winter of '71, after we lost the barn cat. I tried it because I was desperate. Cotton ball, dab of Vicks, tucked behind the flour tin and along the back of the cupboard. The menthol burns their little noses. They turned around and went somewhere else. I have not bought a mousetrap in 40 years. Therefore, I started carrying that jar out of the bathroom and into every room of the house. My oldest girl came home from school in 1966 with a headache that would not quit. The doctor wanted to give her something. My mother got there first. She rubbed a small dab on each of her temples and across her forehead, just at the hairline. Told her to lie down in a dark room for 15 minutes. The menthol cools the skin, opens the little blood vessels, and the tension lets go. That child slept like a stone. Now they sell you headache patches in a foil pouch for $6 a piece. I have the same thing in a jar that lasts me 2 years. But here is where it gets interesting, because I was still thinking of this as a medicine. My neighbor Edna, 89 years old at the time, may she rest, set me straight on that one afternoon in 1978. She had a cracked heel so deep it bled when she walked. She slathered Vicks on that heel thick as butter on a biscuit, pulled a cotton sock over it, and slept in it. 3 nights. The crack closed up. The petroleum jelly holds the moisture in. The oils soften the dead skin, and the menthol pulls the blood up to heal it. I have done that for my own feet every winter for 30 years. My feet at 81 look better than my granddaughter's at 32, and she pays a woman $40 to soak them. So I started using it on the rest of me. A dab on a stubborn cuticle, worked in at bedtime, and by morning the skin is soft enough to push back without bleeding. A thin layer on the elbows, the kind that goes scaly in February when the heat is running dry. A small smear on a splinter you cannot get out, covered with a bandage overnight, and by morning the swelling has drawn the splinter close enough to the surface that it almost falls out on its own. That last one I learned from my father-in-law, who worked construction his whole life and never once went to a doctor for a splinter. But the body is only part of the house, you understand. My mother used to put a tiny dab of Vicks on the cold pipe under the kitchen sink in summer, where the condensation would draw silverfish and roaches. They will not cross it. She rubbed it on the leather harness leads in the barn to keep them supple and to keep the mice from chewing them. She put a swipe on the metal hinges of the screen door so the flies would not land there in clusters. None of this was in any pamphlet. None of this was on any label. This was women talking to women across a clothesline, and when those women died, the talking stopped. I want to tell you about the dog. In 1984, we had a beagle named Sam who would not stop chewing the leg of my dining room table. I had tried bitter apple spray. I had tried cayenne. I had tried scolding. My mother visited, took one look, and rubbed a thin coat of Vicks along the table leg. Sam sniffed it once, sneezed, and never touched that table again. Dogs and cats cannot stand the smell. A dab on the corner of the couch where the cat is scratching. A swipe along the door frame the puppy keeps gnawing. It does not hurt them. It just tells them to go be a nuisance somewhere else. Therefore, I learned to think of that jar as a tool for the whole household. A pea of Vicks rubbed into a small scratch on dark wood furniture will soften it and blend it in until you can hardly see it. A dab worked into the squeaky hinge of an old cabinet. The kind that has gone past the point where oil helps will quiet it for months. A thin smear on the inside of a stuck drawer rail will let it slide again. My husband, God rest him, watched me do that to the kitchen junk drawer in '89 and just shook his head. He said his mother had done the very same thing in 1940 during the war when you could not get proper grease. And speaking of him, the man snored like a freight train going through a tunnel. The doctor wanted to send him for a sleep study. I had him rub a small dab under his nostrils and on the soles of his feet before bed. The feet part sounds like nonsense. It is not. The skin on the soles is thick, and the menthol absorbs slowly through the night and keeps the airways relaxed. He slept quiet for the first time in 20 years. I slept too. That was worth more than gold. I used it on bruises. A thumb hit with a hammer, a shin barked on the coffee table in the dark. A dab of Vicks rubbed gently into the bruise within the first hour brings the blood up and carries it away faster. The mark fades in 2 days instead of 2 weeks. My grandmother learned that from her mother, who learned it from a country doctor in West Virginia in 1912, before there was much else to learn it from. I used it on a stubborn cold sore at the first tingle. A tiny dab 3 times a day. The camphor dries it out before it ever blooms into the ugly thing it wants to be. I used it on a fingernail that turned thick and yellow after I dropped a cast iron pan on it. Worked in every night for a month under a bandage. The nail came back clean. The doctor wanted to give me a prescription that cost $90 and could damage my liver. I used a jar I already had for less than a nickel. But here is the thing I promised you. The thing I did not understand for most of my life. The one use that sat right under my nose and I never saw it until I was 73 years old, I will tell you now. My granddaughter was pregnant with her first and she had terrible swelling in her ankles and her feet. The doctor said walk more, drink more water, elevate. She did all of it. Nothing helped. I was visiting her in the fall of 2017 and I remembered something, not something I had done. Something I had seen my grandmother do for a woman in our church in 1959, a woman whose legs were so swollen she could not get her shoes on. My grandmother warmed a little Vicks between her palms and massaged it into that woman's ankles and calves with long upward strokes toward the heart. Slow, patient, 20 minutes on each leg. The swelling went down before our eyes. I did the same thing for my granddaughter that night. The menthol and the camphor open the surface circulation, and the massage moves the trapped fluid up and out the way it is supposed to go. By morning her shoes fit, she cried. She said no doctor, no nurse, no book had told her this. Nobody had told her because nobody had told her mother, and nobody had told me to tell her, and that knowledge had almost died with my grandmother in a hospital bed in 1968. That is when I understood. This little blue jar was never a cold medicine. It was a poor woman's pharmacy. It was the thing our mothers reached for first because there was nothing else. And because there was nothing else, they learned every single thing it could do. And when the doctors and the drug companies gave us 100 more bottles to choose from, we forgot the one bottle that had been doing it all along. I am not telling you to throw away your medicine. I am telling you, do not throw away the knowledge. It cost the women who came before me their whole lives to learn it. It was nearly thrown out with their aprons and their pressure cookers and their handwritten recipe cards. Now it sits in you. That is worth more than what I paid for the jar. That is worth more than what they will charge you for the jar tomorrow. You did not stumble onto this video by accident. Something in you already suspected the simple, cheap, honest things were pushed aside so somebody could sell you the expensive replacement. You were right. You have been right your whole life. Now, if this story meant something to you, do me one small kindness and tap that like button so this old knowledge finds the next person who needs it instead of getting buried again. And if you want to sit with me a while longer, subscribe and stay, because there are more of us than they want us to know, and we are remembering things together. Tell me in the comments, did your mother or your grandmother ever rub Vicks on your feet when you were little? I read every one of them, and I want to know whose hands taught you. Next time, I am going to tell you about a brown glass bottle that used to sit in every kitchen in America for 2 cents an ounce, and what it did for a burn that no cream on the shelf today can touch. Until then, you remember this. The wisdom of the women before us was never lost. It was only waiting for somebody quiet enough to listen. And listening, that is the part most folks have forgotten how to do. My grandmother Lillian was born in 1,908 inches of coal town in West Virginia, and she did not have the luxury of a doctor 4 blocks away or a pharmacy open until 9. What she had was a tin of Vicks on the windowsill, a cast iron stove, and a memory that stretched back 3 generations to women who crossed an ocean with nothing but the recipes folded into their handkerchiefs. When the flu came through in 1918, and it took her older brother Samuel at just 11 years old, it was Vicks rubbed on the chest every 2 hours through the night that her mother credited with pulling Lillian and her baby sister Ruth through. Lurleen Richardson, the midwife who walked from house to house in that holler, kept a jar in her bag beside the cord scissors and the clean rags, and she charged 50 cents a visit, paid in eggs more often than coin. That same little blue jar, by the way, was selling for around 35 cents in 1925, which was real money to a mining family pulling in maybe $4 a week. Folks did not waste a fingertip of it. You scraped the sides clean. You used it for everything, because everything was what you had. When my own mother Doris was raising 5 children in a drafty farmhouse outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the 1950s, she kept 3 jars at all times, one in the kitchen, one in the upstairs bathroom, one in the glove box of the Plymouth. She said you never knew when somebody was going to need it, and being caught without it was like being caught without matches in a snowstorm. Now, I will tell you the part that breaks my heart a little. In 1978, the big pharmaceutical advertising push really took hold, and suddenly the television was telling mothers that a homemade poultice was old-fashioned. That real care came in a box with a brand name and a child smiling on the front. Sales of cough syrups for children climbed nearly 40% in 5 years, and at the same time, the quiet knowledge of how to use simple things began to fade out of ordinary kitchens. I watched it happen with my own sister-in-law, who threw out our mother's handwritten remedy book in 1983 because she said it was unsanitary. I fished it out of the trash bag on the curb at 6 in the morning before the truck came, and I still have it stained and dog-eared in the drawer beside my bed. That book has saved me more grocery money and more midnight worry than any insurance card ever did, and I intend to copy it out by hand for my granddaughter Hazel before another winter passes.